Again, thanks so much for being here. If you've been here over the last couple weeks, we have been in a series called Entrusted, and we're looking at the things that God has entrusted us with in our lives. And this caused us to do a lot of things, and we realized that where we put our energy into our life, how we're investing our time and our energy, are really based on expectations for life. And so where we put that is a big deal. So much of our experience in life is built around expectations. Some of our pain is built around expectations that aren't met. But we've really been taking this time over this series to look at what things has God entrusted us with, and how can we best use our energy in those areas. One, to become more like Christ and have an impact here in our world and see what we're aiming at. So we have been over this last couple weeks. If you've missed any of those, we'd love for you to jump onto our website or even our YouTube channel to catch up on those. If this is your first weekend here, no worries. You can jump right in with us here this week. Today, we're going to kind of round out the series and talk about what I think is actually one of the most impactful things that God has entrusted us with here each individually, and that would be relationships. So entrusted with relationships. God has entrusted each of us with relationships, and we're going to look at that here this morning. We know this for sure. Relationships are plentiful on this earth. It kind of makes life what it is, but just because they're plentiful doesn't mean that they're all good. Doesn't mean they're all bad, but it certainly brings a bunch of challenges. I think as soon as I said that, you probably had some sort of response in your head, and you're like, Aaron, it is time change weekend. You're not making me talk about my relationships. That's fine. You don't have to talk. I'll talk a little bit this morning. And you might have even had a response where you're like, oh gosh, relationships. Whatever you're thinking in your mind, whether it brought some joy to you because you're an extreme extrovert like myself, and you're like, I love meeting people. Or if you're like, Aaron, if I never met another person in my whole life, I'll be just fine with that. Wherever you fall in there, relationships are going to be part of your life. Right? That is a reality. But relationships are actually something that we would say and see in the Bible that God has entrusted us with. And so it's something that we get to do our best with. And when I started to think about relationships, I think they fall into a couple of categories. Certainly not every category, but these are kind of the large buckets that we see there. And I wanted to lay these out first because I think it'll help us get it thinking in the right frame of mind as we think about relationships. The first one is, I would call them familiar relationships. All right, these are the ones that we would see all the time. These are people that would be familiar to us. This would be our kids, our spouses. This might be our jobs that are like long-term, our coworkers. You're like, I've been working here 25 years. I know Jim Bob real well. He's my buddy, right? We know them really. The people that we see a lot, that we have depth of relationship with, might be someone that we're dating right now. It might be someone that we're married to, right? All of this stuff. These are going to be the familiar relationships, right? The ones that we're used to. And that doesn't make them easy, by the way. Those might be some of the most painful ones, but that is a bucket. The next one is this. I call them proximity relationships. And these are ones that you have relationships with people simply because of where you are. I think about my neighborhood, my poor neighborhood. I bought a house there like 8 years ago now. If they could go back in time, they'd probably stop it, but it's too bad. I bought it. I own it now. And so they have to put up with me, right? I think about my neighbors, right? There are people in my neighborhood that I have relationships with simply because I bought a house in that neighborhood, right? Otherwise, I'm not sure we would have ever met. I'm not sure we would have any interest in each other. Right? There's nothing except for the fact that we live next to each other, right? I would think about this as like where you go to the gym, right? Maybe you're locked into Planet Fitness because it's really hard to cancel there for some reason. If you ever try to do that, it's a fun time, all right? It's like that's your proximity. That's the gym you go to forever now. They're like, you belong to us now. You're like, I'm not sure that's how that works, legally speaking. You might think about the stores that you go to, right? You're like, I'm a Target girl. That's the only place I go. And your husband's like, please, not again. It's the third time, right? You think about that. You think about the gas station you go to. My family makes fun of me because I really like Sheetz. I'm kind of a freak for it, which is like their whole vibe. I just think they have a good vibe, okay? And the gas prices are really cheap. So I like to go to the Sheetz. I stop there every time we go by, whether I need a little bit of gas or a lot of gas. I just really like the points and all that stuff. And my family's like, can we please not, Dad? I'm like, too bad, I'm driving. So we stop there, right? You think about your gas station, the proximity there that you go into, you see the same people all the time. When I think about that, it's a coffee shop, right? It's a class that you have in a building for a semester that you wouldn't have normally had otherwise, right? Those proximity relationships there. I remember going to school and I would see the same people. I didn't really know them that well, but because we took the same path to our classes for that semester, That's where we were. Like every day we passed each other, never spoke to them, right? These proximity relationships. I remember this well because one time I was walking to class. It was the Midwest. I went to school in Indiana. So when it was cold, they were like, just get over it. Just go to class. And they were like, we don't care. And so I was walking, and there's a place by a fountain that for some reason they didn't shut off in the winter. So the wind would blow it, and the ice would get over here. And I remember I got up so early for my 8 a.m. class one time because I was foolish and I stayed up late. And I was walking to my class, got my coffee, was real proud of myself, it's warm, and I'm walking and I go past this fountain. I remember seeing the same girl that I saw on this walk to class almost every Monday, Wednesday, Friday when I had this class. And I was gonna, do the obligatory wave in the Midwest, the head nod or whatever. I mean, I hit the ice from this fountain, okay? My feet, I'm pretty sure were over my head, on my back, coffee all over me. And I think that girl's like, it's so cold, I don't really want to stop. So if I'm legally obligated to, I will, but I'd like to leave just because it's mostly embarrassing. So proximity, right? I saw her all the time, not even enough for her to want to check on me, apparently. So proximity, all right? And places we often go. And the last bucket that I would kind of put these in are encounters, right? These are the things they're brief, they're not normal, they're kind of out of the way. You're unlikely to see these people again. And these happen all the time, right? It's when you're driving down the road. It's like when you go somewhere you don't really go. You're on vacation, so you're in a place you might never be again, right? All of these ones that we would see are encounters in that way. And these are all relationships, right? And we might even equate different amounts of weight to each of these categories. We might say, if I was like, which one of these is the most important? Many of us might say, hey, the familiar ones, those are the most important ones. And here's what I would say today is not that those aren't important, right? I'm not saying your family is not important. Don't write that down, right? Scratch that out if you were already writing that. I know some of you try to guess. And what we're saying here is not that it's not important, right? Just because we put a bunch of time there because we spend more time there and we should, doesn't mean that the other ones are not important. Here's what I would say. When we talk about God entrusting us with relationships, when we think about the people around us, here's what happens. When we understand that we are entrusted with relationships, when we understand that God has entrusted us with relationships, we see the opportunity in every single relationship that we have. So when I paint this picture, right, to me, over most of my life, I lived like some of these had opportunity and others didn't, right? Kind of in the order that I just put them for you, right? The encounters, I'm like, throw away. Do whatever you want because not going to matter. Right? That doesn't really matter. Like proximity, you're like, I'll see him for a little bit, but as soon as his class is over, they might never know me again, right? I'll probably never see them, right? Rarely that's going to happen, right? Even the ones like proximity, I'm probably going to move. I don't fit in this house. Our family doesn't fit in this house anymore, right? We might equate different things there, but when we look at seeing that God has entrusted us with something, when we truly understand that relationships have been given to us, that God has placed these there, we start to see opportunity in every single one of these places. And that's my hope for this morning, is that you could walk away maybe seeing some of these things a little differently than before. Because there is no, I believe, coincidence. There's no happenstance in life necessarily. I believe that most things are an opportunity. It doesn't mean that you're supposed to have a 10-minute conversation with a stranger when you're in a hurry every time. Maybe sometimes, right? It doesn't mean that you have to freak out now and you're like, every person I walk by, it could be something I'm supposed to do, right? No one's punishing you. That's not what we're saying, right? When we think about relationships, what I'm saying is that God could have opportunity there, and he's actually entrusted us with people that he cares deeply about. And that's where I want us to go this morning. Because sometimes we just don't realize what we have. And when we aren't thinking this way, which for most of my life I did not, some things start to happen, right? We start to do some different math. The first thing is we might underestimate our opportunity all around us. First, because we might say, I don't have what it takes to be good at relationships. Here's what I would say to you is, I promise that you have something that someone else needs that no one else can give them. And that is relationship. It doesn't matter if you're extroverted, introverted, and this is not a dig deep in yourself. You have everything that you need within you. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying to you is that God has made you. He's made you for relationships, and you have a part to play in people's lives. What we have to do is recognize the opportunity enough to say, how could God use me in this relationship? Could he use me in this encounter, in this proximity thing, in my family? Even if I don't necessarily right now look at myself and see I am the person that could make a difference here. So don't count yourself out. Sometimes we underestimate the opportunity because we just don't know that it exists. Right? We were totally unaware of that until maybe this very moment this morning. Hey, I'm with you. Somebody had to teach me this. Right? I didn't always see it this way. The other thing that starts to happen when we do math and we don't realize this is we start to say that some things don't matter at all. I remember I mentioned earlier this throwaway relationships. In high school, I got my driver's license, and I was always in a hurry to be somewhere. And I had this sweet Ford Contour. It was really awesome, very rusty, Ford quality. And so I was always driving fast somewhere in this, and I don't know, driving a slow car fast, so whatever that equals. And so I lived out in the country, and it was, the speed limit's 55 everywhere, but there was always like a tractor, an Amish buggy, or just an old person driving slow, okay? I'm just being honest. Nothing against old people. It's just the way it was where I grew up, right? And so I was always in a hurry, and no one else ever was. And I was like, there's no lines painted on these roads, so does that mean I can use the whole thing, just kind of go around, you know? So I remember going home one day, and I had one of these encounters I thought would never matter. And I came up behind a guy, and he was going really slow, and I kind of came around a corner, and I was like, whoa, and I was like putting my brakes on because I should slow down, but I'm 16, so I do it way too late, and it looks really aggressive. And so this guy started to toy with me a little bit, and I took the bait, right? So I'm in this situation now where I'm like mad at this guy. And I was like, I'll show him with all the power my Ford Contour has to offer. As soon as we get going downhill, he's really going to see I'm gonna get him. And so I went, and there was a stop sign coming up. And so in all of my 16-year-old wisdom, I had moments of wisdom. This was not one of them. I did a lot of great things. 16-year-olds are awesome. This moment was not my best. And so it gets worse. And so there's a stop sign coming up, and I thought, I'll show him at the stop sign. It's not what you think. What I thought is I should just go around him and not stop at this stop sign, just fly around him. And so I thought, I looked both ways. It's fine. And so I went around him on the left side. I floored it. Nothing happened. Just made more noise. I don't know if it went any faster. And so I went around him on the left side, and then I gave him a little gesture, and he received that really well, and like most people do. And I kept driving. I went home. And I thought, yeah, I showed that guy. Probably broke my car. I would have honked my horn, but it rusted off. So I couldn't honk my horn. And so I went home. I thought nothing of it. I went to work later. I got home, and somehow, I actually need to ask my parents about this because I don't know how it happened. Either they showed up in my house or the police showed up at my house. I don't know which one it was, but they found out about it, right? And so I was punished accordingly to that. But what I found out later was it was a classmate of mine who was in the car with their dad who snitched on me, which did not feel good. And so I went even further, and this person, I tried to ruin her day by letting her know how unpleased I was that she snitched on me, right? And so I ruined a bunch of stuff here. I broke a bunch of stuff because what I didn't see is that every opportunity matters, right? I lost ground there, right? When I finally came around to seeing what God was doing in my life, I had lost a lot of influence there because I didn't see the opportunity, right? I saw encounters as a thing. I'll behave when I'm around people that matter, familiar relationships, maybe even proximity ones. Encounters, it's free game. I do whatever I want, right? That was my basic point of life, right? We write some of these off. And the other thing that starts to happen is sometimes we try to be owners of things that we're not owners of. When we don't see that God has entrusted us with a relationship, we try to be owners of relationships that we are not owners of. Man, this shows up in people that when we're dating someone, right? This shows up in marriage when we're looking at our spouse, and we would never say, I own my spouse, because people are like, what's going on here? You can't say that, right? We'd never say that, but we're tied together. Right? Because whose is my wife? She belongs to God. She's his creation. Right? When I look at my wife, and I wouldn't say that I own her, right? I wouldn't treat her that way. Right? No, if I said that, people would look cross at me. Right? I would start to, that would be unhealthy. But sometimes we do it in other ways. We might look for total fulfillment from the spouse, this person that we love deeply. Because we're like, this relationship is for me. It belongs to me, right? This is to benefit me. Right? I might look at my kids and think that now I have all this pressure to create something out of my kids because right when my kids are playing around and people are starting to notice that they're like wrestling and they're like, whose are these? I'm like, those are mine, right? I'll say like, they're mine. Those are mine. I own them, right? I wouldn't put it that way, but I'm like, those are mine over there causing the problem, right? I would say that, but whose are they? These are children that God has entrusted to me, right? He's given me specific ways to raise them. Right? There's an opportunity there to not just make well-behaved kids and make them sports stars and live some dream through them that I didn't get to live myself. Right? What is the opportunity there? Right? Not that they become the big businessmen that I can never become. I help them avoid all the mistakes I ever made and they just, do what's the opportunity? The opportunity is to realize that I have been entrusted with this relationship. I'm raising an adult that's going to live in this world, who's going to have to face difficulty, who's going to have to reconcile who God is in their life. And I'm going to screw it up sometimes because there's this magical point in parenting that helps us realize opportunity in relationships that I realize, and if you're not a parent, this will make sense to you too, because you experienced it as a kid. It does not matter what I say. My kids don't listen to yours. No, nobody's kids listen. No one cares what I say. But when I do something wrong, then they suddenly remember what I say. Hey, Dad, you said we weren't allowed to do that. I'm like, oh, so you were listening. Right? What matters so much is how I view the opportunity there. Because what I'm doing is the thing that matters here. When I see the opportunity there, when I screw up, the opportunity is for me to model forgiveness, to model apologizing for taking ownership of something that I did wrong, for letting my kids know that, yeah, I'm not a perfect guy. I do have problems too. I have sinned too in my life. I'm not holding you to some incredibly difficult standard, right? The opportunity is because God has entrusted me and I'm trying to make them into a person, right? A full-grown adult there. So sometimes we do bad math here. Now listen, this isn't a guilt trip because I don't want you to walk away from this weekend thinking like, well, Aaron said if I cuss the guy out on the road, I might pull into the same parking spot and then I got to have answers in the same thing, right? Because that's never happened before. You ever have an encounter like that and you realize you're going to the same place? You're like, uh-oh, I'm going to take another left here just to make sure. Experience. God is working in my heart in this way too. But guys, it's not a guilt trip that, hey, this is because you have screwed up, or hey, all of a sudden now you might have to see that customer service rep that you chewed out on the phone. It's not about a guilt trip. It's not about just getting it right. It's realizing that God has entrusted us with relationships all over our lives. He will equip us to be people who can manage these well if we're willing to see the opportunity. In every encounter that we have with people is an opportunity of some sort, large or small. Everyone around us are people created by God, and he's entrusted us with them. So the question is, how do we view this then? How do we view these relationships? Because I can't dig into every example, or I can only tell you what I know, but there's a place in the Bible I want to take us this morning that will show us how to view relationships that we've been entrusted with. If you want to turn to Romans with me, I'd love for you to see this for yourself in Romans 12, verses 9 through 21. I love this section of Scripture because it really speaks to how these relationships, it's the lens with which to view them. It's not all the answers. It's not like a silver bullet, but it's the way that we can start to view relationships and ask for opportunity. Romans 12, starting in verse 9, says this: love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals in his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Man, I love this because it kind of highlights three main things for us to think about when we're looking at relationships that I want to walk through with you. The first one is this: when we're entrusted with the relationships, there are some things that we need to view them through, which are going to be very helpful. The first one is this: is sincerely give to relationship. I mean, this first section here that we see is love must be sincere. That means we actually have to want to care for people. It is not, no one is fooled by you faking that you want to care for that person. That doesn't fool anyone. They know when you don't want to do it, right? They know when you don't genuinely care about them. Everyone feels that, right? We know we can't fake that. There's this thing that's happened where we feel like, man, relationships are going to be the thing that we get something from. It's part of a deep desire to have connection with people. And so we look for benefit from relationships. When we're dating, when we're married, when we have kids, like we look for benefit in them. What can I gain from this friendship? What can I gain from this connection? We're kind of wired that way. And I'm not saying it's bad to have friends that have connections to things where it's like, that's fine. But man, on the basis of relationship, when we look for opportunity, what we're doing is saying, I'm going to sincerely give to this relationship first. Right? I'm going to know who Jesus is so I know who I am. I need to know good, right? I need to cling to what is good. I need to start to know what good is. I want to have hope for situations that seem hopeless. And in relationships, sometimes I'm going to sincerely give them hope in Jesus because it might be the only answer I have for them. I mean, I love that this being patient in affliction and faithful in prayer, because guess what? Relationships go beyond the bad times. This is when you know if you're sincerely giving in relationships, the bad time doesn't totally blow it up. Bad time makes it hard, right? Having a bad time is not a good time. That's not what I'm saying. Relationships that have opportunity that we dig into, that the Lord has for us, they're not always guaranteed to go well. And when we're sincerely giving in relationship, as the Bible would show us to do, it's going to go beyond the bad times. We're going to make mistakes. Our spouses, our kids, they're going to make mistakes. Relationships that sincerely give go beyond that. I love the end of this where it talks about being hospitable. Practice hospitality. Many of us are good at this when we're having people over. Some of us are better at it. We're good at when we're inviting people in our house. But what we're talking about here is the rest of the world. What does an attitude of being hospitable look like? I'm just going to say it. Some of y'all just need to smile more. How's it gonna hurt you? I look at some people when I walk around outside and I'm like, do they want to kill me? I'm like, what's going on? And I know some of you are like, I'm thinking, and then I'm like really struggling to think, and so I make this mean face. I'm like, I don't know. One time I was playing drums, and I used to play in a metal band, and I started playing at a church, one of our other campuses when I was like 23. And I was playing drums with like a metalish face. You know, you just got to look angry. It's like kind of the thing. And so I was like, I'm like, real. And so one of the pastors was like, hey, you having fun up there? And I was like, I'm having a blast. I love playing drums. And he's like, tell your brain to tell your face that. I was like, oh. It's like, thanks for that piece of advice. I feel very self-conscious just now, very vulnerable, very naked. I'm like, everyone sees me. So like, I had to go work on that. I'm not saying you got to do smile exercises, but man, when we're out and we're being hospitable, what happens is we are welcoming to people wherever we are. It won't kill you to ask somebody how you're doing in the grocery store. I got in that situation the other day when I got up to the register and the thing wouldn't scan that they were trying to scan. I finally found eggs. I experienced a miracle, actually. I found eggs. I went to scan them, and I like grabbed them as they were putting them in the case. I was like, thank you, Lord. And I got there and they wouldn't scan. I'm like, oh boy. And I have a couple choices. I just stand there and look at the floor. I'm like, don't interact. Or I get out my safety blanket and I scroll. Or I say the scary phrase, how you doing? How's your day going? Right? Sometimes you get a fine, and that's all. Right? Sometimes you get a whole, you never know what the opportunity is. But man, being hospitable, welcoming people in, just looking at people and acknowledging them when you walk by them. Some of you are like, but Aaron, that could that could make a conversation happen. Like, it's okay, you'll live. Unless you run into me, then we're going to be friends forever. I'm just kidding, we won't. But, right, people can read the room. You're allowed to leave a conversation if you're in a hurry, but you can smile, right? We can do that. We know we can do that, right? I'm not telling you new information that you, like, sometimes we have to look for the opportunity. If you're like me, I forget what I'm doing. I am so focused on getting the eggs, and I'm like, get out of my way. I'm like on a mission, and I forget that I'm representing Christ where I go. And that even these encounters matter. And by the way, because those wouldn't scan for like 10 minutes, they gave me free eggs. And I was like, are you sure? I feel like I'm robbing a bank right now, to be frank. And I'm very afraid that something's going to happen in the parking lot. I was like, honey, I'm on the way home. Gather the kids. We're going to leave. I got free eggs. But they're going to find out. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was scary. Right? Be hospitable. We're going to be hospitable in these. Here's the second thing is when we go into relationships, we are going to be with others where they are. This is a big deal. Right, we're going to give to them. It starts right off with bless those who persecute you. Right, people are going to come against you. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have any confrontation or you shouldn't say any hard things. We actually addressed this a couple weeks ago. Where we're like, sometimes it's doing the right thing in the right way. Saying the right words in the right way. It's not what you say, it's how you say, right? That sort of conversation. People are going to come against you. There's going to be tough times, but bless those who persecute you. Meet them where they are. You're going to meet people who are angry. When people are rejoicing, hey, could this not be about me for a second? Could I rejoice with them? When people are mourning, you don't have to fix it. You can just cry with them. Like, Aaron, I don't cry. I'm like, get over it. Try it. It's not that bad. It's okay. Right? When we meet with people, we want to meet them where they are. We want to stay collected. We want to look and say, what's the opportunity here? Right? We don't want to, at the end of this, it talks about going in, don't be afraid to associate. Be humble. Don't be proud. We don't want to go into these relationships saying, oh, I'm better than this person, so I can help them out. I'm doing them a favor. It's like a pity relationship. You were that person at one point, and someone was with you. In my darkest moments, I needed someone who would just be with me. Just because I know better now doesn't make me better. Just because I have Jesus in my life now doesn't make me better than the person who doesn't. We're going to meet people where they are. This happens to me so frequently because, like I said, I struggle with this like situational thing. Like there was like this life with Jesus and then like all the other stuff that was throwaway. For me, this shows up often in like driving. Like I'm just be honest with you, right? For my first story, you probably already know that. Like I really, really struggle to meet people where they are. I'm like, well, they deserve this. They're persecuting me, right? They're often not. I'm just upset. I'm upsetty spaghetti, right? I'm going to get upset at these things. I was in a car accident a long time ago, like 2 years now. I had arm surgery, and so I was a little freaked out. I just got my new car replaced because it was totaled. And I was driving down the Akron highways, which, is like super safe because the construction's so good. How they paint the lines, wow, chef's kiss. It's just so good. They're like going everywhere. You're like, where do I go? I don't know. Ah! Everyone's just fighting for their lives out there. It's a little crazy in the interchange. So I was coming through there, and they had one of those goes like this, and you're supposed to figure out what lane you're in. And somebody hit my truck, and so we pulled over. It wasn't a big deal. The guy came at me pretty hot. He's a Tesla driver. He goes, hey, that couldn't have been my fault. My car's self-driving. Great words for me to hear. That made me so happy inside. And I was immediately like, well, your car self-drove itself into me. That's what I said. And right, I have some options here. I can match the energy. I can get all upset. I can escalate it on top. I can start talking about who deserves and what, who's doing blah, 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 blah. Right, I can do all that. I've done it before because I don't get it right all the time. Right, or I can just say, we can say the right things here, which is this is not my fault. I can walk through it and I can do it in the right way. I'm going to meet him where he is, but I'm also not going to ruin the opportunity here for anything else to happen. I can be firm and kind, right? All of that works. I want to be with people where they are, even if they're angry, if they're mourning, if they're rejoicing. We want to try to meet them where they are. And the last thing that we see here is we want to do it God's way. Man, so much of what we learn on this earth, and even just if we just follow kind of the natural bearing of what where our minds take us to, is we do what feels the best in every situation. That leads to a lot of terrible decisions. You probably know that, right? My strongest feeling, if I followed that every time, woo, boy, not going to be good. But often in relationships, especially in some of the ones that I'm like, well, this is my family, they do this all the time, right? It feels like I should just let them have it. It feels like I'm owed something. It feels like I've worked so hard on this and you don't work at all, right? It feels a certain way. Where God is going to lead us is into a way that is different. Don't repay evil for evil, right? Don't be overcome with evil. Overcome evil with good, right? Like I said, this doesn't mean that because you're afraid of confrontation, you just don't say anything hard ever, right? It's that you see the opportunity that could exist and you care about that. And so you say things in a different way than you might otherwise, right? We're going to do this God's way. It's maybe unexpected. Because here's the thing that's crazy about this is this isn't just something we made up. This is how God came to us. You and I. The reason that Paul's writing this is because he's seeing what Jesus did, and he's laying this out as you pursue relationships, know that this is how God pursued you in relationship. God loved us and sincerely pursued us and gave to us when he sent his son to this earth to live a life and die on a cross for us. It says that he came to serve, not to be served. Right? He came because he loved us, because he calls us his friend. In relationship, he sincerely gave to us, even though we screwed it up. We sinned. Right? We had the encounter with God and we maybe gave him the gesture I gave the guy in the car. Right? God came to us in relationship. He met us where we were. He meets us right where we are today. If you're in this room, it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what you did today before you got here, right? He wants to meet you where you are. There's a reason that you're here. It's not just because that person invited you or they made you come and you don't really. God is in relationship sincerely reaching out to you because he loves you and he wants to meet you where you are. And he wants to give you a better way to live life and a better way to look at relationships that you have. Every relationship matters because it is one that God, first of all, he created them and he has entrusted that to us. The thing that's helped me more than anything in all of these relationships is it's really hard to look out a window of a car and see a person who's just cut me off and say and do something when I believe that they're created in the image of God. When I believe that's a person that God has entrusted to me in this moment, it's very hard to see it any other way. And even if I screwed up, it's hard not to feel very convicted about that and very like the Lord is trying to do something that I missed an opportunity there. It's what God did for us. It's how he came to us. Here's the thing is it's not about getting it right every time. It's about seeing it right more and more. You're going to blow it. I'm going to blow it. I still have these moments. When we see it better every time, we're going to do better every time. There's some relationships in my life that I know this is true because I've actually gotten multiple chances in situations where I blew it the first time. And the next time I knew that probably wasn't the best way to do that thing. And so I maybe handled that a little differently. But here's the thing is I didn't know how to do this until someone taught me to do it. I didn't know that this was a thing until I read the Bible and saw that Jesus cares about every single person on this earth. And so that means that I should as well. I don't know what part God's going to ask me to play in every familiar relationship and any proximity that I'm in. I don't know what he's going to ask of me. But because God was willing to come to me in this way, I want to be willing to see it and to take that opportunity to help people grasp onto who God is, to help them see something different than they've ever seen before, even if it's a person who screwed up and got to apologize to him because I did it wrong. But I didn't know this until somebody told me about it. Somebody taught me to do it. Because I had this with my son recently. They're doing a pipeline project in my neighborhood in Akron. They're putting new gas lines in, and so there's just people everywhere. I'm off on Fridays when they're working, and the boys love to watch it. They've got like, they're tunneling underneath, they're digging stuff. I mean, there's just everything that like a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old love. And so we go out, and because someone taught this to me, I look at this very differently now than I used to. And so I get giddy about it. I'm like, I'm going to go out and talk to these guys. Like, I'd do that all day. It'd be so fun. And so we just went because my boys wanted to see one of the, they were actually at a hydro truck. They were like digging holes with like pressurized water. It's really cool. And so they wanted to ask, my oldest son was like, how does that pump work? I'm like, let's go ask him. So he starts asking the guy. And then the guy asked me, do you work in construction? I was like flattered, but no. I was wearing boots, so I don't know if that's what it was, but maybe it's just my general, I don't know. Anyways, so I was like, no. He's like, what do you do? And he's like, I was like, well, I'm a pastor, which is always, you never know what you're going to get with that. And he said, man, it's really cool that your kids are out here interested. I love doing that. I have a daughter. And he couldn't even finish the sentence. This guy started crying. And I'm like, oh, man. And so I began to hear a little bit of his story. And I'm like, I'm salivating honestly. I'm like, I'm going to get to tell this guy about Jesus. He's like, maybe you could say a prayer for me. I'm going to need him because I'm leaving this job to go to Florida and be with my daughter again. And I was like, can I pray for you right now? I was like, I did it. I saw it. And then my son, who's 6.5 years old, is like, hey, Dad, can we go home? I was like, that moment is ruined. And so I'm like trying to pray for this guy. And he's like, Dad, I'm really bored. I was like, yes. He's 6. He doesn't know. When we went home, I said, buddy, do you know what I was trying to do? No, I just wanted to go home. Like, I feel you. Do you remember why we're here? Why are we on this earth, right? We talk about this some. He's like, well, to tell people about Jesus. And I was like, yeah. I was trying to tell that guy about Jesus a little bit. I had an opportunity to pray with him and maybe help him to know Jesus. Only interaction I had with that guy. But my son didn't know because I'm teaching him. I told him about it. Right? I saw the opportunity because I have practice. It's not about doing it right every time. It's about seeing it right more and more. I guarantee you that my son will start to learn that. He's going to see it differently. That is how God looks at us. He's not like, you dumb kid, you embarrassed me in front of everyone, and you're an embarrassment to my name. No, he looks at you like a father, a good father, and says, son, I know you don't know this. Could I help you see this? Because that's how the Lord is with me. He's patient. He's walking with me through it. So here's what I want us to do when we think about this. A couple questions for you. The first thing is to ask, what relationships do I have right now? You might think about the familiar ones pretty easily, but what about the other ones? That you're like, I'm just getting gas, I'm just going to the store, think about like if you just had surgery and you're doing therapy and you're like, you have that window of time, like what do you have in your life right now with relationships? Right? Take an inventory of that and think about where is the opportunity going to be? Here's the second thing I would ask you to ask is this. What is the number one place I struggle to see what God has entrusted me with? For me, the encounters, every time. I'm somewhat decent with the other ones. The encounters I really struggle with because they're brief, they're sometimes charged. I really, really struggle to see those well. The Lord is working in me as we speak. I have failed at it. What is the number one place you struggle to see what God has entrusted you with? You might say, it's my family. They're a lost cause. Oof. Let's look and say, maybe I can't do anything, but could God do something there? And you don't understand, I'm just not a likable person. Nobody really wants to talk to me out and about. Okay? I bet if you realized who you were, how God thought of you, that you have much more opportunity than maybe you think. Don't count yourself out. I bet you have something that someone else needs in that time. And the last thing is what is a huge opportunity that you could be praying for? I don't know what huge is to you. It's relative to where you are. For us, for my wife and I, it looked like when we moved into a neighborhood, neither one of us really had neighbors growing up because we lived in the country. And she lived on a farm. I lived next to a bunch of them. And we had neighbors. And we're like, what do you do when you see someone through the window of your house into their house. You're like, that's really freaky. I don't know what to do. Like, what do you do when you go outside and like there's always somebody out there doing something? You're mowing the yard and your mowers are like touching. Like, I didn't know what to do. So we started praying, like, could we have opportunity in our neighborhood? Could we know every person on our street? I know every name I know all the names of my neighbors on my block. Some of them because other people have told me their name. I've never caught them in a conversation. But it allows me to pray for them. But here's the thing is those have shown up in some of it's just I wave to the person who will never wave every day. I will wave at you for the rest of your life, right? I'm going to wave. And they're like, please, no. Like, I'm not saying you have to do that, right? Some people I've got to show up in some pretty incredible crisis situations. And I've had some deep connection with some of my neighbors. There's several neighbors that we've gotten to care for over time because they're widows and they're alone, right? There's like some incredible opportunities we have, but it's because someone taught us to look this way. God taught us this, and we started to look at them differently. So what could you be praying for? Man, I believe that if we could do this together, if we realize this is how we make real impact. It's not some grand plan or scheme. It's really seeing the opportunity that God has entrusted us with. That's the way we make impact in our world, in our neighborhood, in our schools, all those places, by simply looking at the relationships around us. It's a journey. You're going to have to be humble about it. You're going to have to apologize. You're going to have to learn some things. But man, God is not just putting people around us to annoy us, to be an obstacle to a goal. Right? These are God's people that he's entrusted to each and every one of us. So if you're a follower of Jesus, ask yourself these questions. And where am I struggling? Have I not seen this here? And if you're not a follower of Jesus, would you know that this is how God came to you in this room today? He wants you to know him and how much he loves you, how much he cares for you, and how he wants to walk through life with you. And he did that in sincerity. He came to you because he wanted to. Not because he's forced to, not because he has to, because he wanted to love you. That's a big deal. So it's out of thankfulness that we do these things. It's out of seeing what God has done for us. And so if you're here and you don't know Jesus, you're exploring, know that's who God is. That's his heart for you. And as believers, we're not walking around, we don't get it right all the time, but we're not trying to just make ourselves look good and behave all the time. We're trying to look around us and see how we can get other people to know who Jesus is and what he's done. So if you haven't ever done that, maybe consider a relationship with him or reopening that chapter of your life to say, I'll let Jesus define who he is for me. I'll read the Bible instead of letting somebody else tell me or the way that I maybe feel about God. Let me look and see what he actually says about it. You'll find some awesome stuff. Let me pray for us. The band is going to give us some space here as we consider these things. Jesus, thank you so much for the way that you love us. Thank you that you came to us in this way. God, thank you that we don't have to look at the relationships around us with hopelessness. God, with just a place to be leveraged. But God, we can look at it as an opportunity to celebrate who you are, to show what you've done in our lives, to simply meet people where they are like you modeled for us so many times. God, we're thankful for that opportunity. Would you help us to see it? Would you teach us to see it? God, we know that you're gentle, that you're patient, and that you're kind with us as we learn this. Because we simply just don't know sometimes. God, sometimes we lose hope, we lose faith. God, would you build us up in every way in the relationships around us as we seek to be known by you and to make you known to people around us in every sort of relationship that we have. We love you, Lord. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for walking with us through every relationship that we have. Amen.